Hello and welcome. I'm Pastor Micah Royal from Life's Journey United Church of Christ. As I do each week, I want to share a reflection of Scripture to bless you in the middle of the week here. As those of you who've been following know, last week I shared some thoughts of mine from James chapter 1. And as I was praying about what to share, it dawned on me that James is a wonderful book for the days we find ourselves in. And I thought it would be good to continue looking at the wisdom the book of James gives us in our midweek reflections. This week, I want to look at verses 13 to 21 of James 1, where James tells us, "No one who is tested should say, 'God is tempting me.' This is because God is not tempted by any form of evil, nor does God tempt anyone. Everyone is tempted by their own cravings. They're lured away and enticed by them. Once those cravings conceive, they give birth to sin. And when sin grows up, it gives birth to death. Don't be misled, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good gift, every perfect gift comes from above. These gifts come down from the Father, the creator of the heavenly lights, in whose character there is no change at all. God chose to give us birth by God's true word. Here is the result. We are like the first crop from the harvest of everything God created. Know this, my dear sisters and brothers. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to grow angry. This is because an angry person doesn't produce God's righteousness. Therefore, with humility, set aside all immoral filth and the growth of wickedness, and welcome the word planted deep inside you, the very word that is able to save. I think these words are very important to reflect on, this week especially. I write the words that I'm sharing today a little after our incoming president and vice president joined other leaders in Washington, D.C. at a memorial service to remember the lives of the over 400,000 people in our country who died of the coronavirus. I think at this point, there are very few people who don't know someone in their lives affected in some way by this past year's pandemic. In addition to those we've known who've gotten sick and died, many of us know some who've recovered, but with lasting health problems. We also know those who've lost their job or their business in the way this health crisis has upended our economy. Some of us have had to learn to work from home or to support our kids in taking their classes at home. All of us have been touched in one way or another by this difficult time. Also, we have heard the cries of those impacted most by the pandemic, our Black and brown neighbors, who've cried out for us to recognize that their lives matter as much as the lives of those of us who are white. That's what they mean by Black Lives Matter. As this pandemic has revealed for us all to see the inequities they have faced in unemployment, in opportunities, and in fair treatment in healthcare, and at the hands of the criminal justice system. And with the inauguration of a new president tomorrow, it is hard not to think about the attack on the Capitol, but some few weeks ago, and the stark divisions it reveals in our country. It is easy when we face such times to give the easy answer. It is God's will. We call, after all, natural disasters acts of God. Yet James warns us against saying the trials we face, the struggles that are before us, come from God. God is the giver of every good and perfect gift, not one who sends trials and temptations along our way. As a hospice chaplain, which is what I do in addition to pastoring, I can't tell you how many hours I have sat with people hearing the pain they face and their experience of illness, of loss, hearing them ask, why is this happening to me? Every time I wish I could tell them why. I wish I could answer their question of why. You know what? I can't. I don't have a crystal ball to see the reasons why. Instead, I can simply tell them and show them by showing up when and where they are hurting that they are not alone. You know, the Bible is not such a crystal ball either. So, although it can tell us why some things happen, it does not really pretend to tell us why some of these big things we struggle with: disease and loss, natural disasters and business failure, unemployment. Why so many of these things happen. Instead of telling us this, similarly, just as I say to people, this is a chaplain, the Bible tells you and me we are not alone. The God who is the giver of every good and perfect gift is with us, shining light into the midst of the gathering shadows, taking us by our hands, guiding us if we will but follow, and giving us what we need, not only to get through the trial, but also to come on the other side, come out the other side, stronger than we began. We remember this by doing as James says, not letting the situations we're in cause us to let simmer resentment, anger, hatred, selfishness, and other knee-jerk reactions that, though human and inevitable, would held on to warp us into becoming cold-hearted, hurtful, or selfish people. In a way, when we see the violence in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, and also the violence that has been let loose on other streets throughout this year, we see the end result of such letting our struggles inspire bitterness, resentment, hatred of others, what it produces. Instead, James challenges us to choose another path of compassion, of listening, of letting ourselves become more open. In his book, Here and Now, Life in the Spirit, the late Catholic spiritual writer Henry Nouwen wrote about the way in which the Dalai Lama chose this path. Inspired by his Buddhist faith, the Dalai Lama opened up to others in the face of painful struggle. Nouwen writes, I know a few people who have seen as much suffering as the Dalai Lama. As a spiritual and political leader of Tibet, he was driven from his own country and witnessed the systematic killing, torture, oppression, and expulsion of his people. Still, I know of few people who radiate so much peace and joy. The Dalai Lama's generous and disarming laughter is free from any hatred or bitterness toward the Chinese who ravaged his land and murdered his people. He says they too are human beings who struggle to find happiness and deserve our compassion. How is it possible that a man who has been subjected to such persecution is not filled with anger and a desire for revenge? Henry Nouwen answers, when asked that question, the Dalai Lama explains how in his meditation he allows the suffering of his people and of their oppressors to enter deep into his heart, and there be transformed into compassion. Some of us are heartbroken with loss right now. Some of us are opening up to new hope. Some of us are sad about who will be inaugurated tomorrow. Others elated. Some of us have fear about the future and anxiety about the present. Others are feeling ready for whatever lies around the corner, believing it brings good things. Wherever you find yourself this week, be open. Let what we have faced together and what lies ahead of us become, as the Dalai Lama's experiences were for him, an opening to new and deeper compassion for others, for yourselves, for God's creation. Blessings on each of you.